Hey guys, what's up? It's Andy here. I'm a self-taught developer, and today I am so excited to share with you an interview I did with my best friend from high school. His name is Brian. Brian is a really smart guy. He's a software developer, and I asked him a lot of questions that you guys have been asking me in the comments. I feel like we covered a lot of topics that are sort of really relevant to people who want to become software developers. Interestingly enough, he and I became software developers at the very same time. He lived in New York at the time. We both happened to be following the path of software developers just sort of by coincidence. So, yeah, so interesting story. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments. And without further ado, here's your interview. All right, guys, this is Brian. Brian, say hello. Say hi.
Hey, everybody.
So Brian is my best friend from high school. And as I mentioned previously, Brian and I learned how to code sort of simultaneously at the same time, which was... How did we find out about that? That was sort of random. Like, I remember we were talking to you one time, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm learning how to code." And you're like, "Oh, I am too." And
yeah, that's how I remember it. It's like it had been a while since we caught up, and then I asked you what you were doing. You're talking about this programming adventure, and you finish your story. I'm like, "That's kind of crazy." It's like exact same thing I've been up to.
Yeah, we didn't plan it. It was total coincidence. So that was kind of that was a cool period of my life. Was learning code along with you, and I would say we definitely had different experiences. Like, for example, you went to a coding bootcamp. Is that correct?
That's right.
Oh, cool. So before we get into that, because I know there's a lot of people who ask a lot of questions specifically about boot camps, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself, just basic information, so people kind of know where you're coming from?
Yeah. So, as Andy said, my name is Brian, and currently out in Seattle, Washington. I'm working for a startup, or kind of like emerging from startup status, a company called Hearsay Systems, and it's a software as a service marketing platform for people in the finance industry. But yeah, I've been out in Seattle just for about 8 months, and as Andy mentioned, we started moving toward kind of this programming career around the same time. So it was about 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, that's about what I'm up to now, and mostly front-end engineering.
Front-end engineering. Okay, cool. What front-end stack do you work on typically? Are you React.js primarily? So
currently, probably about 80% of what I'm doing is React.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some Backbone parts of the app that are still around.
Okay.
Along with jQuery, some experiments in Angular 2/4/6/8 or whatever number they're on now.
Right.
So it's kind of a little bit of everything in terms of front-end frameworks. Yeah. And then doing a little bit of back-end, which is all Python currently.
Cool. Oh, good stuff. Well, I kind of want to ask you, what is your story becoming a software developer? So I specifically mean, when did you decide you were like, I'm working a job right now that wasn't a software developer, right? And then you suddenly thought, well, I want to become one. So you took a boot camp, or could you just sort of maybe elaborate on how that started, where you started with that?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, it goes back, I guess, pretty far, probably about 2013. Maybe even 12, 13 when I first started thinking about making the transition. So up until when I started programming full-time, I'd been doing mostly like nonprofit and government jobs. And a big part of all of those jobs had been Excel. So I was doing tons of Excel, cleaning up spreadsheets and data, even a little bit of like Access, like database kind of things.
Microsoft Access?
Microsoft Access,
okay, yeah,
correct.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess for folks who don't know, it's a pretty like basic like visual database application, and my brother, who's actually a programmer, I've been talking to him about all this stuff, and he's like, "Hey man, you should really think about programming because a lot of what you're doing, I feel like you could be doing it faster or better if you would learn programming." And so, taking his advice, I started looking into Python. Because that's what it seemed like a lot of people were using for kind of like the data cleaning and analysis that I was doing. So I started really basic, with Python, but trying to automate some of the tasks that I'd been doing. Mm-hmm. And after a while, I got to the point where tasks that used to take me anywhere from like 1 to 2 or 3 weeks were now getting done in a day or an afternoon. Just because I had this Python pipeline set up to handle it.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like around 2013, and that was about the time when I decided to like really, kind of like dedicate my time to making the transition into programming full time.
Wow. And so at that point, did you decide to take a boot camp? How did that process go down?
So I decided to do a boot camp, and General Assembly is one that I went to in New York. And part of the process of doing that, so like with this adventure of learning Python, it was going pretty well because I had something really specific to apply it to.
Yeah.
Like these tasks at work that I wanted to speed up or automate. But when it came down to just like learning how to make websites and how to make like more complex applications, I had a really hard time just figuring out where to start. So honestly, it took me probably about 1.5 years of like stopping and starting programming, like learning on my own, before I decided like I just need to jump into this head first. Dedicate this, 8 hours a day instead of like maybe 1 or 2 hours an evening after work.
Yeah.
And so in signing up for the boot camp, it wasn't that I didn't think I could do it without the boot camp, but I was really having trouble finding the motivation to dedicate enough hours to actually make it a serious career transition. Yeah,
because it's funny. I've known you for a very long time, and you're a tinkerer. Like you love tinkering with different things, and I would always assume that you could just teach yourself programming if you really decided it. The problem for you and everyone else, who wants to become a programmer is just the resource of time. You just don't have enough time. And I don't know if you'd agree with this, but learning programming is so similar to learning a language in the sense that you have to be immersed in it every day to sort of really make big strides. I think I definitely for a period of time would spend the 1 hour a night during the weekdays and then, 4 or 5 hours on the weekend when I first started learning. But I realized if I wanted to make that next step, I had to fully immerse myself in it. Because if I could work on programming 8 hours a day, I knew I could just pick it up fast. But, we all have constraints. I had to pay the rent and I was trying to do all this different stuff. So it's interesting to hear it from somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's 100% right. For me, like I do like to tinker, like whatever kind of catches my interest. I just sort of follow that thread and I keep following it until I feel like I've learned enough, or maybe it's getting too deep for me to really understand.
Yeah.
And which makes it really hard to learn something like programming, like without any guidance, because I'll get started on this one path, run into some error, just get deep into that. And then, maybe it's 2 or 3 hours later and I feel like I haven't learned anything. So it was kind of like the dedication of time, but also like, what should I be learning?
Yes. My YouTube comments are just full of people like, what should I be learning? And I remember that very vividly.
Yeah. So it was, it was a big decision to sign up for the boot camp. They're not cheap. At the time that I signed up for it, I was living in New York, paying New York rent, and the boot camp was about $13,000, I think, for 3 months, somewhere in that neighborhood. And so that's like money that I barely had, and for a career transition that seemed like anything like a sure bet.
Right. You're sort of taking a leap of faith that boot camp will work, right?
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And I guess this is probably a great point to put in a plug for all the people in my life who helped me make that transition.
Absolutely.
So I tried to save up as much money as I could, but knew that it wasn't really going to be possible without the help of friends and family. Just kind of even, support for, rent or a place to stay, and even just emotional support. But that's, for me, was really important in being able to make the transition successfully. Yeah,
absolutely. I know that one thing that a lot of people will definitely be curious about is the boot camp specifically. I'm sure that you could probably go on for days and days about the different aspects of the boot camp that's helpful, but how does a boot camp, specifically the one that you attended, teach you the skills that you needed to become a software developer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's kind of, I think, 2 main skills that the one that I went to taught. So one was like kind of first and foremost like the specific technologies. So it was JavaScript and Ruby at the time, and so the way that General Assembly did it at the time is they would talk with professionals and recruiters and ask, like, what are you looking for? You have this many recs open. So are you looking for JavaScript, Python, Ruby? Are you looking for like Rails or whatever it might be? So they kind of do the work of taking the temperature of the industry and figuring out, what they should be teaching new students. And so for me, kind of as I mentioned before, that was really helpful. Like the what should I be learning? And so at the time it was Ruby and Rails and JavaScript, mostly Backbone. And so we went and we kind of did a high-level overview of those technologies and a number of other ones too. So that was kind of like the first thing, is like they already tell you the things that you should be studying, and they take that work, I guess, off of your plate, and I guess that uncertainty. And then the second thing is they teach you how to find answers for yourself.
That's huge.
Which is like the biggest part of programming is finding answers.
AKA Googling everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And then usually the top result in Google is Stack Overflow.
Right.
And so, from Google to Stack Overflow and back. But basically, how to search for the right things to fix the problem that you're facing now.
Yeah.
And one thing that they told us a lot was that, like programming in general, like it sounds maybe like it's specific, but really it's this huge wide field with a lot of different areas. And like they compared it to like a wood floor or something like that. And it's like, we're going to teach you one plank in this wood floor. And then, putting it all together is going to be sort of like the challenge and the adventure that starts after the 3-month boot camp.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say that, because I find that when people do ask, like, what should I be doing, for example, they're like, oh, I want to become this type of developer, what should I be doing? And I'm like, if you just started, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, to me, personally, if you just learn something that's simple and easy, something like Python or JavaScript, you're going to learn the fundamentals of programming, because really the fundamentals of programming are basically the same throughout the programming language stack, with a few exceptions, certainly, absolutely. I find, like, C++, I never got into. My friends recommended that's sort of a nightmare for newbies. But once you learn that, then you have a good foundation of programming principles, and then it seems like you can kind of go and figure out where you want to go. But at the end of the day, software development is not one thing. It's not a monolith. Certainly, it's not a monolith. It's such a wide open field. You could be doing anything from machine learning to, I guess some people would even consider some graphic design in the software programming, because some designers do know JavaScript and they can do a little bit here and there. So yeah, it's just interesting to hear you say that.
Definitely. And I think I also want to mention here, especially, kind of like watching your video and I guess, sort of like know most of your story, but seeing it in condensed form in your video. But one of the things that you talked about was DeVry, and whether it was, I guess, maybe like quote unquote worth it to go, or, would you do it the same way again? And for like my boot camp experience, I don't think I would do it the same way if I were to go back in time and do this all over again. Mm-hmm. It's a really expensive way to get into the field, especially when a lot of the knowledge is just out there for free. And I think increasingly, like, the free resources out there doing a better job of like staging the material, like telling you what you should focus on first and second and then third, and kind of like how to help yourself. And so I think what I'm most grateful for is that it gave me that kick in the pants to just go ahead and do it. Almost like one of those diets, like where like you give your friend, $100 if you don't hit your goal, and you just like keep doing that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it starts to feel expensive and costly. And so that's what the boot camp was for me. But honestly, like the material that was presented, the way that it was presented, the level of support for job searching and things like that, I don't necessarily feel like it was like I would do that again the same way next time. But again, I'm a working, gainfully employed developer now, so it ended up working out.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, because I wish I had just dropped out when I got my job. My first job, because it was 7 months after I started, I got my first job, and then it took me another almost 2 years before I got my degree. I kind of just wish I dropped out, because I didn't need it at that point. My employer at that time said they give me a bonus for finishing, which they did, but I don't know. I didn't. My second job that I got, they didn't care about my degree. They just really liked me and they wanted me to come on. So, but it's easy in hindsight to say that. It's harder if you're out there right now and you're like, I just want that validation of either the boot camp or the schooling, and I wouldn't blame anybody for doing it. It's a personal choice, and I wouldn't want to be in that position.
100%. And if you're struggling like I was to find focus and motivation, and in my case, it was 1.5 years of trying to teach myself, just like on nights and the weekends, and it just wasn't working. So, for me, again, hindsight, all that, but it was the right thing at the right time.
Absolutely.
That's probably right. Yeah.
Absolutely. So once you went through the boot camp, how did you find your first job?
So finding my first job was an adventure and stressful. I finished the boot camp in the fall, around September, October, something like that. And it was probably September. And then I spent a solid 2 months just searching day in, day out. Putting together dozens of applications, tracking it all in spreadsheets, all of that good stuff. And what ended up being most helpful in my job search was finding a way to get in front of people, just like face to face and in person. So a lot of times that would be informational interviews. So I see a job that I like at a company that looks really interesting, and then just to reach out to somebody there, and generally higher than would be appropriate normally. Find somebody on GitHub. They've got interesting projects. They're like, hey, I see that, this is what I was doing. It's like, hey, I see that you're working here, and this job sounds really interesting. I'm pretty new to the field, but I see you're using these technologies that I'm interested in. Would you be open to talking on the phone or something like that, or meet up for drinks? So that actually ended up being really helpful. And because I felt like a lot of my applications were just going off into the ether.
Absolutely.
I'd submit it, and then nothing would happen. I heard back from one company. It was a no, 12 months after I applied. Being able to get in front of people, I was able to talk to them directly. They could see that I was passionate about it. They could ask me questions, and it was very low stress, low pressure. They didn't feel like they had to do anything. In fact, most people, if you ask them for help, they're kind of flattered that you reached out to them. So don't be afraid to just ask for informational interviews, for phone calls, what have you. I found that to be super helpful and directly led to the couple of interviews that I did get. That first job, it was actually an email intro that was forwarded to me by somebody else who I'd done an informational interview with. He knew that his friend's company was hiring. And so I did another one of those informational interviews. We had a really great conversation, and then that led to them offering me basically a 1-week trial, come and hack on a project, see how it goes. And it was paid, which was awesome. And so hacked on a project for about a week. I liked them, they liked me, and then they made an offer.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great story. It's different from mine, but it's cool to hear someone go outside the box to find that first job. Because I think that at the end of the day, people not overvalue, but they overestimate their technical abilities. So in other words, they're so worried about making sure they're technically capable. Once you pass a certain threshold, you're technically capable, then you have to worry about how do you get that first job. And that's, to me, as difficult as learning to program, in the sense of you're going to have to think differently. You can't just, if you're going to put your resume out there, you're competing with people who are already developers. You can't. They're going to look at your resume, I should say, and they're just going to be like, you have no experience. I'm not looking for this. So it's interesting. And I would say one other thing, little known secret, and this is probably something I should talk about on my channel in the future. In at least what I have seen in the technology field, the recruitment process of finding talent is one of the most inefficient things I've ever seen. There are so many tech companies looking for good quality employees. And I've seen at 2 companies now, without airing their dirty laundry, they've wasted a lot of money hiring people who didn't work out. So for them, my point is this, for them to have someone like you come up and say, hey, what's going on? I like your code. I like it. I just want to have a few questions. Can I buy you a beer? They get to know you, and then they see how you are. Then they try you out for a week, see that you're, one thing is big thing is passionate, you're detail oriented, and you're willing to learn. My gosh, that you save that company possibly tens of thousands of dollars that they didn't have to pay a recruiter to bring you on. So I just feel like people should be very confident in the approach that you suggested, because that's going to be good for employers. It's going to be good for you. There's an opening there that I think a lot of people don't take advantage of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're 100% spot on. Like the recruitment process for tech jobs is so broken and inefficient. People spend a lot of time like staring at resumes and seeing how well it lines up with this like fantasy job description that they posted online for somebody with 8 years of experience and the exact technology they think they need at that moment. Mm-hmm. When in reality, probably what they want is somebody who is passionate, who is coachable, who is willing to make mistakes and learn from them. And ultimately, for a lot of places, like somebody they want to hang out with, and they can't figure most of that out without actually getting to know you. So it's sometimes it's nice just to be able to help the companies get around their inefficiencies by just like finding a way to get to meet somebody in person. Yeah,
it's underrated. It's underrated. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. Really important question that, man, I know I thought about a lot when I was learning was, how do you overcome the imposter syndrome? Which, for anyone who's watching this, basically, how do you overcome the feeling that you are, I don't know how to say this, that you're completely inadequate, that you are a terrible developer, and by the way, this feeling lingers on when you get your first job. You're sitting there, you're say you get hired by a company, and all the people around you are decently skilled, and you feel like you have no skills, and your head's you're barely treading water. That might not be a great explanation, but I think most people know what imposter syndrome is. But how did you feel that you overcame it as you progressed?
Oh man, I wish I could tell you that I'm over the imposter syndrome, but it's kind of like a phobia is an irrational fear. The imposter syndrome is it's like not that it's irrational, but I think the magnitude of sort of like the uncertainty and the anxiety of being inadequate is like not in proportion to reality. Yes. So it's like, it's not that the fear isn't rooted in anything. Of course there are things that, that I don't know and that most developers don't know. Of course there are ways that we're doing things wrong, and at least, but I feel like the heart of imposter syndrome is just sort of like this chronic sense of not belonging, which can lead to just like anxiety, to not doing as much as you're really capable of at work, because you're so afraid of the consequences of being exposed for being, a bad developer if you were to put some work out there and it gets scrutinized. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of it can be a kind of debilitating affliction, but I'd say there's definitely ways to manage it for sure. So that first job, the company that hired me, the CEO, he's in the CEO and CTO role, just an absolutely brilliant man, and his work was like just flawless in general. I learned a lot from him, but like my meager output and the quality was just not the same in comparison to just how much he's putting out and how good it was. Led to this everyday sense of almost like dreading going to work. Like I'm going to contribute like my 20 cents to his $50, like every day. But like while I was putting myself through like mental and emotional torture about this, I was actually learning and absorbing so much through the process and getting better and better and better. But I never felt like that. And in the end, like I ended up kind of sabotaging myself in that role because I never really felt adequate. So it's just kind of part of my programming story. I ended up getting laid off about 3 months after I landed that job. I think in large part because of just like the anxiety and how much stress I was feeling about not being adequate. So I really had to just do a reset, just on my whole mindset. And what that looks like was kind of like reconnecting with like friends and mentors and asking for just kind of like objective evaluations of my work. And actually kind of the most important thing is just continuing to code, because like the more that I would code, the more feedback I get, the better I get, and like good and bad. And so it kind of took me a while of, just kind of really focusing back to basics again. And before I felt like really confident in programming, but I don't know. I'd say, and then also looking back on it, just realizing like how much of myself it was and giving myself that feeling. Like, I don't think the company gave me any reason to feel as bad as I did. And so much of that negative feedback cycle was in my own head.
Yeah.
And I think really taking some time to reflect on that. It took like about a month or two, but, kind of rebuilt the confidence to get out, like apply, find the next gig. And happy to say, like, I came out swinging with that next gig, which was awesome.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny how there's really it seems as if there's no magic pill for the imposter syndrome. I know everyone would probably be like, just tell me the one nice trick to get over it, but it's just essentially just living with it and figuring out how to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've been doing it for a number of years now. The funny thing about gaining experience is you start, increasing the level of competition too, like you get a promotion and now the people around you are like even better again. And so there's always going to be somebody to compare yourself to and some reason to think that you're inadequate or deficient. But honestly, it's just about just continuing to work. Just put out work, submit something that you think maybe is half done or it's wrong. People will tell you what's wrong with it, but also tell you what you did right. The imposter syndrome sticks around, but I'd say number one piece of advice is do not let it lead to paralysis.
Yes.
Just keep moving.
Yeah, and you should definitely, I think one of the things I was lucky to have personally that worked for me was I had, at my first job, I had a supportive group of developers. So, and I was always asking questions. I was so probably annoying to the point of annoyance where I would ask them questions about everything. And I thought it was maybe a little bit annoying, but they were like, this guy really cares. And I think they were willing to accept whatever maybe mediocre or low quality work because they saw in me that I cared. And that goes a long way in helping people to support you and give you good feedback, which is why I didn't have crippling anxiety when I first started at my first job. So yeah, that was my experience.
Yeah.
Why do you think it took you so long to get into programming? Because if you think about it, your personality is very much a programmer. Like that's just knowing it is how you think. But it took you till you're almost 30, right? And yeah, it's like, what took you so long? Why not do it earlier?
Yeah, and actually, just even add a little bit more background onto that. So I first started programming in middle school, like TI-83. Graphing calculator games.
Oh my God, I remember this. I'm not going to air your dirty laundry, but I do remember this.
Yeah, and the most bogus GeoCities website, just ever. So I did a little bit of programming in middle school and kind of the beginning part of high school. And I mean, it's kind of crazy, but the main reason why I sort of dropped not just programming, but even most of my interests in math and science was one job shadowing day. And I don't know if you know this story actually, but so I was into programming, a little bit experimenting, and then my parents sent me to work with a friend of theirs who was working at Lucent Technologies, which is actually a really amazing research lab in Illinois. So it was pretty cool to be able to get to go there, as a high schooler. But just seeing the day to day, I mean, I just couldn't believe what the life of a programmer actually looked like. So just a really quick illustration. So I guess back in the days, how you would program is you would write some code, on a terminal, and then you would put it on a disk, and then you would walk it over to the server room, and then you load it from the disk onto the server runs it. It breaks and it tells you what lines of code broke, and then you take that back down the hallway to your terminal where you locate those lines of code and then you try to fix them. And so I was watching he's brilliant, he's awesome, but I was watching his day to day, which is fix a line, walk down the hallway to the mainframe, it breaks, walk it back down the hallway. I was like, I cannot do this. This is the life of a programmer or a scientist, and this is just totally not for me. And I ended up going on a just totally different track, liberal arts and sciences. But
by the way, that makes me feel a lot better about. Well, it makes me feel worse because every day I get really mad that my project takes a long time to load when I rebuild it in Visual Studio. So it takes a long time to compile. It takes 20 seconds, and I get really mad. So makes me feel better. I should not take my situation for granted.
Definitely. Yeah. And so, yeah, looking back, that's kind of like a funny story. It's like, man, this one day, like, kind of changed the course of my life in a weird way. But what's, I think, funniest about it is just how, like, wrong of a perception of the whole career and field I got, like, from that one experience. And I guess just by way of explanation, like, that seemed like a really drab kind of job or day-to-day experience, but like, he was really excited about it, and because like he actually had a connection to the end product and like what he was trying to build. And I kind of saw that for the first time when my brother was trying to get me into using Python to do my job better. And it's like, okay, like I see the end goal here, and like, this little bit of code is going to save so much time. So like, let me keep hacking at this and making it work. And then, yeah, there's like an error, and it tells me like, oh, something like syntax error, line 7. So I fix that, and then another one. But like, that motivation to keep going through is like that connection to the end goal and the end product. And I was really just sort of like missing that in my perception and in high school. But yeah, I think, like, even, right now, not going to lie, like I love hearsay systems, but, I never saw myself making, like software as a service for financial professionals. But the problems are really interesting. The tech is complex. And so like my little bit of code feels fun, and that it builds toward like this collective goal. And it's all very collaborative, like with product, with design, with like the sales team, like customer support. I'm not alone working on code. I'm working on these like teams, these interactive teams and diverse teams toward a shared goal. So yeah, it's like nothing at all what I imagined in high school.
Yeah, and things have definitely changed in high school. I'm sure that was more of the norm as a programmer, but within about 5 years from that time, I think things were already starting to change. And it's interesting.
Absolutely.
All right. So another question: what is the most rewarding part of programming for you?
Yeah, for me, the most rewarding part kind of gets into what I was talking about with kind of like my misconceptions about what programming is. And yeah, strangely enough, like my favorite parts of programming are that it sort of like lets me into this creative process. There's like a product that the product team wants to make, and they talk with design, and then like it comes to me, and then we all work together to turn this idea into an actual feature that people are going to use, and hopefully they love it and they're excited enough about it to pay for it. And that's kind of like what makes the whole thing work. But yeah, that collaborative process, like I find so enjoyable. And in reality, most of my day isn't programming. Most of my day is like figuring out what it is that people actually want me to build and why they want me to build it. And I'm probably doing that for maybe like 30-40% of my day. And then the other 60% is actually at the keyboard and writing code. And so that collaborative piece, I find super, I guess just what's the word, like inspiring or motivating.
Yes.
And then sort of that analytical like part of my brain where I love diving into a problem, then I just go into it, just kind of in the zone and coding. And so kind of get the best of both worlds. Yeah,
absolutely. Because you wouldn't want to do all of one or all of the other.
No, definitely not. If my day was 100% just in a cubicle writing code, people deliver requirements and I write the code and that was it, I think I would find that just horribly tedious.
Yeah.
But I'm also not a project manager. I'm detail oriented, but not like that. So if my whole day was coordinating these teams, then I don't think I'd enjoy that as much either. And so with programming, I get the best of both worlds. I get to dive into problems really deeply, but then I get to come back out and be social, be collaborative. And it's that mix that I really like.
Yeah, I can definitely relate in a lot of ways. That's definitely one of the more rewarding parts of programming for sure. What would you say are your least favorite parts, or maybe the least rewarding parts of coding or programming?
Oh boy. Yeah, least favorite parts are definitely those times when it gets to be tedious. And that happens sometimes. You're working on something and it seems like nothing that like I do is right. I'll be working on a problem, and it's like error, or like maybe there aren't any errors, and
Those are
it's
the worst.
working, but it's not working. And so, like, where do I go to figure out why this thing isn't working? And typically, that gets to be the hardest when I've been working at a problem for a long time and haven't taken a break. So sometimes the best thing to do is just walk away from it, come back to it the next day. But those moments when they happen it's just so frustrating for a machine to tell you no in so many different ways over and over again.
Mm-hmm. And at some point you start not trusting the machine. You're like, there's got to be something wrong with the machine, but it's like, no, it's code. Code typically doesn't malfunction. So
yeah, absolutely.
It's usually the programmer.
Yeah, there's some old saying that I'm probably going to get wrong, but like the problem is between the chair and the keyboard, or like,
yes, it's PEPCAC.
PEPCAC, yeah.
Problem exists between computer and chair. I don't remember either.
Something like that. Basically, the problem is me. Like that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you a question that's kind of random. What is some of the weirdest or worst advice you've heard out there for aspiring developers? Like, what is something that you've heard that's just like, oh, that's really dumb?
Yeah, I think, some of the bad advice, I'm not even sure if anybody told this to me specifically, but that you need to know everything.
Oh,
like,
God.
That at some point you'll have, like, that you'll know enough, and then, like, you'll be doing your job, and, like, that's it. And, like, that's just so not the case. Like, there's no way to learn all of the things. And in fact, a lot of people get by and are really productive knowing so much less than even I do, just being, like 2 years into this. But, they're just in such a specific domain that they're really productive in that domain. So I just wouldn't try to learn everything. You don't have to know SQL, like, and Python and Ruby and JavaScript and HTML and, like, all the CSS corner cases. Like, you don't have to know all of it to be ready to be working and to be productive.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more on that one. Well, I'm going to ask one last question and get you on out of here. I know you got a busy rest of your Sunday. Last question is, what is your future goals in software development? Where are you looking to go in the future?
That's a good question. And I don't really have a good answer for that. I started out this career like wanting to do something that felt like more like rewarding than what I was doing before, and I've definitely hit that point. And right now, like, I'm kind of like zeroed in on just becoming a better and better developer, which for me kind of means working with new and different tools. I started out Python with kind of like the data processing, and then moved into web technologies, and I've been doing like front-end web development for the last 2 years. At some point, I kind of want to move back toward back-end, and being able to like stitch together a whole system so that it works together well. In terms of like specific goals, not too much more apart from just continuing to learn more and more about the field, to ask for challenging assignments, and just keep diving into new and different things.
Yeah, but that's a good answer. It's like with software development, it's like the world is your oyster. You can kind of choose whatever route you want. You're not stuck down this narrow path. Like if you're a doctor, there's not too many things that you can do. I mean, that's pretty well, would you say, like your path is only one of so many things. Whereas software development, it's like, who knows where you could be in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. It could be drastically different than where you are now.
Definitely. Yeah. And then kind of like most of us out there, I have some dreams of startup ideas and app ideas that I've been like working on and not working on in my free time. So
we all got them.
Yeah. So launching one of those, I'll just say it.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, hey man, thank you so much for coming on my channel. I know that just after this interview that a lot of people are going to love it, give me good feedback. I think they're all going to want to see your own YouTube channel, so you should definitely think about it.
I don't know who wants to watch this all day, but
You never know. All right, man. Well, thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later, man.
Thanks, you too. Good to see you, bud.
All right. Bye-bye.